In 2023, India became the world's most crowded country, as per the United Nations. Now, where do you think the United States fits in? It's at number 3, and in terms of size, it's the 4th largest country on Earth, covering about 6% of the land. With 335 million people living there, you might think there's plenty of room for everyone, but it turns out the population is spread out unevenly. Welcome to superstructures. Let's imagine drawing a line right down the middle of the country, starting from North Dakota in the north and running down to Texas in the south. When we crunch the numbers using census data, something fascinating pops up. Believe it or not, a whopping 80% of the entire U.S. population lives to the east of this imaginary line. The remaining 20%? Well, they're living on the western side. It's like 1 in 5 Americans. Think about big cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. If you check out a satellite map of the U.S. at night, you'll see that the right side is shining pretty brightly. But here's the question. Why? What's causing such a big difference in population distribution? Okay, let's simplify this. The story begins on the East Coast, where the U.S. got its independence in 1776. That's where the first 13 colonies were. As time passed, people started moving west, and a big moment in this journey was the Louisiana Purchase. Nowadays, that part is mostly known as the Midwest, fitting neatly with the Mississippi watershed. This area has really good soil for farming. But does this automatically mean lots of people live there? In the U.S., most folks live on the east or west coast. That leaves a huge chunk of land in the middle kinda empty, known as America's underpopulated belt. It goes from the Canadian border in the north to Mexico in the south. This stretch covers 350,000 square miles, twice as big as California. Surprisingly, it's 12% of the whole U.S., excluding Alaska and Hawaii. This belt spans 7 states from north to south. But here's the kicker. Only 1% of all Americans live there. The middle part isn't totally empty. It's got over 3 million people, about the size of Jamaica. But there's plenty of room for more. Let's look at Nigeria for a sec. It's slightly bigger than this underpopulated belt, but it's got a whopping 206 million people, making it the 7th most populated country globally. Pretty impressive, huh? Now, why isn't the American Midwest booming? Well, quick history lesson. The U.S. expanded from the East Coast to the West Coast. But that doesn't mean the West was way behind. Take San Francisco and Los Angeles, incorporated in 1850, just 13 years after Chicago. Portland, Oregon, joined the crew the following year. Then, in 1869, the U.S. finished its first transcontinental railroad, linking the country up. So, there's no super strong historical reason why so few people live in the middle. All right, let's dive into some fascinating geography. If you check out a map of the U.S., you'll see that this belt is sitting in the Great Plains. As the name suggests, it's pretty flat, which you'd think would be perfect for big towns. But not really. To the east of this area, there's a big brown patch. That's the Rockies. These mountains are something else. They've been around for about 76 million years, with several peaks over 14,000 feet high. Plus, a bunch of the Rockies are national parks, huge areas of protected nature. But the most important thing? The range affects the climate of the whole region. Ever heard of the rain shadow effect? Here's the lowdown. Weather systems get going over the Pacific Ocean, and when they head east and bump into the Rockies, things change. The air has to climb over those mountains, and as it does, it cools down and turns into rain and snow. So, people living on or west of the Rockies get a good soaking, but just a few drops for those to the east. By the time the Pacific air gets to the Great Plains, it's pretty dry. In fact, it starts sucking up moisture from the land around it. That's what creates the arid climate east of the Rockies, the exact spot where not many Americans live. It's one of the driest parts of the country. In the 19th century, when settlers arrived, they were probably thinking, this place in the plains isn't ideal. I'll just keep going west. Plus, there was the California gold rush pulling them that way. The climate in this part of the plains isn't great for farming. and wild temperature swings don't help either. In a single day, it can go from a warm 70 degrees to a chilly 30 degrees. These sudden changes can be tough on health, kind of like stepping into an air-conditioned room on a scorching summer day. It's not the most pleasant feeling. Now, here's a twist. Southern California also has a dry climate, yet nearly 40 million people live there, making California the most populous U.S. state. Their secret? A huge network of irrigation canals and aqueducts, plus a share of water from the Colorado River. Summers in the Great Plains sizzle with intense heat, while winters bring bone-chilling cold. Blame it on the polar winds. They hitch a ride along the Rockies ridges and then swiftly swoop down into the plains. Picture this. A winter day in Wyoming might kick off all pleasant and warm, but by afternoon, the temperature can plunge below zero. Dressing for the day becomes a bit of a puzzle, and you might start thinking twice about moving here. Well, guess what? 99% of Americans seem to share that sentiment. Humans have this thing for comfort, you know? So, we tend to settle in places with temperate climates. Those extremes of too hot or too cold don't attract a huge crowd. Take a look at the driest inhabited continent, Australia. Almost 70% of it is either arid or semi-arid, basically, a fancy way of saying it's a big desert. That's why most Aussies are cozied up on the coasts. About 90% of them live in big cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. The odd one out is the capital, Canberra. They built it inland close to a water source. But just like in the States, Australia's interior is pretty empty. There's only one major town in an area as big as 12 Lake Michigans. Big shout out to the folks in Alice Springs. They're living in an oasis. Now, what about places with a temperate climate like Europe? You'd think the population is evenly spread out, right? Well, kinda. In Germany, for example, 77% of people live in cities. They've got plenty of major ones to pick from. Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, and Cologne all have over 1 million residents. Let's shift our focus to neighboring France. How many cities with over 1 million folks can you think of? Paris, definitely. That metro area has over 12 million residents. Notice the big gap? This lopsided population distribution is pretty common in most big European countries. Take Greece, for instance. 35% of the population calls the capital, Athens, home. So the sparsely populated center of the United States isn't such a unique case after all. America might be the land of opportunities, but folks tend to find better chances in big cities. The top 100 metro areas in the country make up at least 3/4 of the nation's GDP, and most of them hug the east and west coasts. You won't find any cities with over 1 million residents in America's underpopulated belt. That wraps up today's exploration. If your curiosity got a good dose, hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And if you're hungry for more, make sure to subscribe to Superstructures. Stay tuned for our next adventure.